We've talked about how ecosystems can go from a fallen log to the entire coniferous forest in size. What do we do when the ecosystem gets really big and it starts getting impractical to compare them just because they interact with neighboring ecosystems? For example, if you, say, have coniferous forests next to grassland, that's very different than coniferous forest next to deciduous forest. Why? Because they inevitably have some interactions. Well then, instead of using ecosystems, we use a more general term, biomes. A large geographical region defined by climate, by precipitation and temperature, and by other biotic and abiotic factors. So we see here that the tundra biome would require quite low temperatures and a reasonable amount of precipitation. Although we do note that when it's very cold, there is fairly little precipitation for the simple reason that cold air cannot hold as much water. So even if you're trying really hard to wring some water out of that air by cooling it further, there's not that much. Desert. Alright, so it's much warmer and there's very little precipitation. Grassland, oh, we have more precipitation, but it's still around the same temperatures as desert. Boreal forest and deciduous forest need higher amounts of water than grassland. And we notice that boreal forest requires lower temperatures, for the reason that at higher temperatures, deciduous trees can outcompete conifers. In the tropical forest, the temperatures are high on average, for average yearly temperature, and the rainfall is somewhat variable for the simple reason that there is tropical seasonal forest and tropical rainforest. And of course, there's tropical dry forest as well. Seasonal forests have a monsoon season and a dry season. Dry forests have the same, except their monsoons are a little bit smaller. Depending on definitions, some areas, they are the same thing. So, here we see Canada's major biomes. Now we know that there's the Great Plains of North America. So this area is the grassland biome. Grassland. Here we have deciduous forest. Deciduous forest. And then up here we have the boreal forest. And up here there's a tundra. Now we know that there are many ecosystems in British Columbia, including a temperate desert and a temperate rainforest. So what can we call this? It's all mixed up because there are so many mountains that up the mountains you find conifers, you find deciduous forest, and at the bottom you find all sorts of stuff. Grasslands, even deserts. So what can we call this? Well, we call this mountain forest. Mountain forest. It is a highly variable biome that is basically a basket that we threw all of these different ecosystems in just because it's convenient and because of a few shared traits. The tundra biome has one really obvious characteristic. Permafrost. It's permanently frozen. Not quite. Somewhere under the ground, there is a layer of permanently frozen soil. This does not mean that the tundra is all permanently frozen. For example, there are moths and butterfly species that take 8 or 9 years or so to manage to go from egg to adult, for the simple reason that their caterpillars wake up after hibernating for about 9 months of every year, eat for a few months, and then go back under a rock to hibernate. Well, do you think caterpillars would survive if the ground was permanently frozen? If the surface of the ground was frozen? No. They go under those rocks and they hibernate, and the snow covers the rocks, and that's why they aren't found and eaten while they're hibernating. So, permafrost also hosts a bunch of surface plants, like flowering plants included, and birds. So many birds migrate into the permafrost to, well, build their nests on the ground during the summer. So short, warm summers. Well, short, cool summers would probably be more appropriate. Low rainfall. Low precipitation. And, well, low average temperature. We can list like Arctic hare, Arctic fox, and so on for typical species. But, oh yeah, polar bears as well, of course. But we are not going to save time. Boreal forest, the one that most Canadians are probably most familiar with. So lots of conifers, i.e. cone-bearing trees. They win over deciduous trees in this biome, partly because of the shorter growing season. Conifers can photosynthesize even in winter, because they don't drop their leaves, i.e. needles. And they don't snap as easily as deciduous trees under heavy snow. Hence the cone shape. Now, what else can we say about the boreal forest? Well, okay, clearly warmer than tundra. Also, more precipitation. More precipitation. So, what else can we say about the boreal forest? Well, we might list grizzly bears, foxes, wolves, rabbits, deer, moose, all sorts of typical organisms. Say trees as well. Pine trees, of course. Cedar, and so on. Spruce. Well, we can say a lot of things. But, for the most part, this is about all we really need. Also, yearly amount of sunshine, i.e. days of sunlight, are also important. Growth season length is another statistic that is important to include for most biomes. So the growth season for the boreal forest is of course much longer than the tundra. It is shorter than the grassland, and it is shorter than deciduous forest. Grassland. What can we say about grassland? Well, usually grassland has less precipitation than boreal. It also happens to be much flatter in Canada's grasslands. Than boreal. Flat terrain. So there's not much cover, few trees. This also says something about the types of predators you must have and the types of prey. Little cover. And it is warmer, too, than boreal. In fact, in Canada, the transition from boreal to grassland is not so much exclusively due to precipitation, so much as it is due to the heat, compared to the precipitation. On the other hand, transfer from grassland to temperate deciduous forest is basically purely a matter of precipitation. More precipitation than grassland. Precipitation. Than grassland. And the transfer from boreal to deciduous is due basically to just temperature and length of growing season, which is typically defined as something like, above 5 degrees Celsius at 20 centimeters below the ground surface. The number of days where that holds true is the growing season. Number of continuous days. That's something that you will learn a bit more about in a later biology class. For now, you don't really need to know so much as growing season, the season where things can grow. Makes sense, right? Hence the name. Warmer than boreal. You might also want to comment on soil quality. For example, the boreal forest typically has somewhat acidic soil thanks to certain tree species involved. As the grasslands have fairly rich, deep soil thanks to the sheer amount of grass that has lived and died there for however long. The temperate deciduous forest has less nutritious soil compared to grassland. Why might this be? It's partly because forests are practically designed to burn. A lot of them, such as lodgepole pines, can't even shed their seeds without burning. So mountain forest is basically just all of the above, crammed it so close together that we can't be bothered to assign it to any particular biome and therefore blah. So that's basically why they made mountain forest. Variable temperatures and conditions mix deciduous and coniferous trees. The one big unifying factor of mountain forest is probably that rainfall on west slopes. Why? Because if you take a mountain and you force air pass up and over it, it'll turn into a cloud and down it goes. And then the air that goes over is a rain shadow. This is why the Basin and Range province in the United States has such deserts, because they're in a huge rain shadow. Alright, in summary, precipitation and temperature are the main abiotic factors that affect what biome will show up where, i.e. what general set of ecosystems you can expect. Terrestrial biomes have distinct biotic and abiotic characteristics. Well, yes, what is here, temperate deciduous, might be over there boreal. Now, they might change over time. For example, the deciduous forest is slowly creeping northward thanks to climate change. Why is it slow? Because trees cannot get up and move, contrary to several myths and legends. Trees stay where they are. They can only spread their seeds, and they can only spread their seeds so far. And that distance that they can spread their seeds per century, because it takes time for the new trees to grow up and spread their seeds further, that pace is not nearly fast enough to keep up with man-made climate change. The 5 main Canadian biomes are tundra, mountain forest, deciduous forest, boreal forest, and grassland, in no particular order. The boreal forest is the largest biome in Canada, in both biomass and area. So, that's it. This section is not very long, but we do learn that there is a level between biosphere and ecosystem. The biome. Ta-da! So, that's it for this section. We'll see you again next time.